Hello out there, casual fanatics. Jeremy here, and just another casual vlog. I know pretty much that's been the only thing I've been putting up for, well, weeks now. Uh, I do not know how long that trend will continue. To be honest, I'm still trying to get myself back in a mindset where I can make videos again. Of course, last March was pretty terrible month for me. April's been better, but busier. So, yeah, I'm going to be looking very much forward to May because I may actually be somewhat settled into things and also, and also hopefully good things. Um, this vlog's actually not to talk about current events in pop culture. No, this one's a little more personal because it took me the longest time for me to realize this. But I realized that not too long ago that I had kind of gotten burnt out a little bit with playing tabletop role playing games. One in particular, Pathfinder. And it, it took a lot of introspection. I'd already kind of been disinclined to it for a while, but it really took the last month or so to finally hit me that I was burnt out on it. And the reason why I got burnt out on it is, quite frankly, and some of you who watch this that are tabletop fans are probably going to get mad at me for this. I hate Pathfinder. This is not to say that I think that Pathfinder is a terrible system or that it just outright objectively sucks. No, I want to make that absolutely clear. I do not think that in any way, shape, or form. If you love Pathfinder, if you play Pathfinder on a regular basis and you enjoy it, I do not wish to take that away from you. But speaking for me personally, Pathfinder sucks. And again, it took me a while to finally realize that because looking at Pathfinder, it is an evolution of D&D 3.5. And with it comes a lot of baggage from the earlier editions of D&D. It is pretty much it is the most complex version of D&D that is ever out there. 3.5 is. And then Pathfinder took that and expanded on it for the people who were mad when D&D 4e came around. Now, again, as I've said many times in the past, I will continue to say until the end of time, I started with 4e. I did not start with Pathfinder. When I started playing, it was at the tail end of the days of 4e. As a result, 4e will always have a special place in my heart. I don't think that's by accident, though. I think that the major reason why 4e has stuck with me is not just because it's number one, but because it works for how I play. It is a well-known fact, going all the way back to the podcast days and even further back to the days when I used to do Twitch streaming, and that the reason why this channel is called Casual Mode is because I am not hardcore. I mean, for the love of God, I call kendo sticks shinai because I'm trying to be culturally accurate. You know, to me, a chair is something you sit in, not something you clonk over someone's head. And as I have said before in the past, when it comes to Pokemon, my playing style pretty much better suited to the one-player games, because when it comes competitively, I just pick the Pokemon that I like the best. Don't really care about, about picking ones that are competitively optimal, and just roll with that. And that is largely the reason why I am the self-proclaimed Albatross champion. But Pathfinder does not fit my playstyle. And I'm going to kind of go with a little compare and contrast here between the two, between 4E and Pathfinder, to kind of give you an idea of what I mean. Now, all of this is predicated on the fact that I am someone who does not play roles necessarily as they are meant to be played. I am a concept player. I'm the one who takes the roles and twists them to fit my desires, as opposed to twisting my concept to fit any particular archetype. That's not how I roll. Admittedly, it's a very egocentric method, but it works for me. With 4E, you can kind of get away with that, because even if there's less options there, if you take a look at the character from a personality standpoint, when it comes to the role-playing things, you can re-flavor them as you wish. And aside from that, with the limited options you have, if you have an idea of what your character's personality is in mind and what kind of a character they are, then the options having to deal with picking things becomes trivial anyway, because you're going with ones that fit the motif that you're going for. With Pathfinder, there are myriad options, but if you pick any of those options, you better know how to play the options as they are meant to be played. There's not a lot of room for wiggle. So let's do a little compare and contrast. Putting a little bit of melee capability into 4E, into a character that normally doesn't have much in the way of melee capability, isn't by any means optimal, but it can be done, especially with feats like melee training, where you can make their melee basic attack take their best stat as the stat to go by, instead of, just strength or dex, depending on whether it's a ranged or melee weapon. Or excuse me, I mean whether or not it's a finesse weapon or not. Well, in Pathfinder, there's kind of a little bit of that, but it's mostly limited to if you're not a strength-heavy character, but you've got a pretty good dex. You can use dex, and you can take feats to make dex be your attack instead of strength. If you have, say, a fair to middling dex, but a really high charisma, to the best of my knowledge, there is no way in Pathfinder to take your charisma and have that be your major attacking stat unless it's as spells. And if you're wanting to make a character that has their spells go alongside more of their melee rather than the other way around, then that doesn't work too well. Believe me, I know. I tried to make a melee-focused bard. Laugh at me all you want. With 4E, the rules were pretty easy for me to pick up. Within one or two sessions, I was able to get them. And I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, admittedly. With Pathfinder, I was playing that for a couple of months, and I never felt like I got any more of the mechanics learned by the end of that time than when I started. I didn't feel like I understood the system any better by playing it. And that was after multiple different level ups on 2 characters. With 4E, every single character has the opportunity to shine, not just in, not just outside of battle, but they have the opportunity to shine inside of battle. It's not just a matter of, fighters tank, wizards damage. It's a matter of everybody at some point can do something awesome in battle that contributes. And most of the skill challenges are set up that there's hardly ever someone sitting on the sidelines doing nothing. It's still possible for that to happen, but it's less likely. With Pathfinder, if you're building a character that's pretty skill focused, you're probably not also going to be very good in combat. If you're building one that's combat focused, you're probably not going to be building one that's very skilled. And again, it falls into those same archetypes that fighters are good early, magic users are better late. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing because it does give the wizards over time and the magic users over time a role next to the fighters, having a balance like this as opposed to a balance like this, I don't consider that fun. If it's going to be balanced, it needs to be balanced from head to toe, not just like that. It needs to be like, if you're going to balance, it needs to be like this the entire way. So 4E and even 5E to a certain extent, like this. Pathfinder starts out like this, flip-flops over like that. No. And it also has a lot to do with the experiences that I've had with both. So this is less of an objective critique between the two in relation to my playing style and more of a bit of subjectivity. 4E, with rare exception, every time that I've played 4E has been with people that I've enjoyed playing with and has been very, very fun. With Pathfinder, yes, there were some people that I did play with, but there were a lot more times that just made me angry or sad or depressed playing it than anything else. So that colors the perception a little bit as well. Honestly, my experience with Pathfinder actually brings me back to another game that I played for a very brief period of time, like about 3 weeks or so, when I was in Boise, Idaho. It was a D20 system game called Alternity Dark Matter. Very much kind of a X-Files kind of thing. Where it was a modern kind of it was a modern horror, really. And I created a character for it. I was trying to create a martial artist who had fallen in with the mob and became an enforcer. Problem was that when it came to things other than fighting, he couldn't do shit. And this was a problem because he was masquerading as a mechanic. So when you have a mechanic who can't change a tire on a car, cover instantly blown. Part of that may have had to do with just the mechanics of how you create characters in Alternity. I didn't, optimize much of anything except for his unarmed combat. But yeah, it just it wasn't very fun for much the same reasons that Pathfinder wasn't fun. It felt like I was forcing myself to have fun. And that was for a much shorter period of time than Pathfinder, so I didn't really get time to have the deep level of burnout that I had with Pathfinder. And the thing is, I know I got burnt out on Pathfinder very quickly. I got burnt out within maybe about 2 or 3 weeks of playing it. And yet, I kept going. I kept going because I felt like there was going to be at some point where there was going to be kind of a breakthrough. I felt like there was going to be some point where it would finally come to me that I got it. I felt like I would learn it over time. I felt like I would be able to appreciate it for what it was. That moment never came. And then came my terrible March, which just got me out of nowhere. And yeah, I was down for a long time for that. I mean, being at a job that I liked and not being able to work was enough of a problem. Because of my car. Feeling like I was being persecuted for taking care of myself was even worse. And then I had to add in an additional element of a family member in a hospital. And yeah, that didn't help matters. So while I was having to deal with that, I was forced pretty much to step back from Pathfinder. And it was during that time that I wasn't playing Pathfinder that I realized why I wasn't having fun playing Pathfinder. I realized that I was burnt out. I realized that I had been forcing myself to play a game that I hated. Why am I telling this story to you? Consider it a cautionary tale, my friends. As soon as I started playing Pathfinder, I realized that it wasn't a system that played to my strengths. And yet, I thought that there would be a moment where I would get it. I thought that there would be a moment where I would be able to see it for what it was and find a way to use its potential and its capabilities to play my way. My way is completely antithetical to how most people treat Pathfinder. So unless I find a group out there somewhere that plays Pathfinder much the same way I do, with GMs who are looser on the rules, who do not expect everybody to know everything, or even most of everything, or even in some cases, because my memory is terrible, the basics of their class, who are a little more lenient with that, I'm never going to enjoy Pathfinder. I'm sorry, Pathfinder fans out there. It is true. I do not wish to take away from your excitement. I'm just saying why it doesn't excite me. And it is in that realization, and with the help of other people who are involved with the tabletop community, people affiliated with Nerdarchy who are patrons of Nerdarchy and fans of Nerdarchy, and people who are patrons of Dawnforged Cast, and Andrew himself, who subscribed to my channel not too long ago. Thank you for that, man. In that moment, I came to that realization, and I found my way to deal with that burnout. My way to deal with that burnout is to return to the source. Sometimes when you find yourself way farther out in the water than you ever intended, and you find that you've almost drowned because you're too far out there, and you're dragged back to shore by some lifeguard or some people who care about you. You want to go back in the water. You don't want to stay on the land out of fear forever. But at the same time, you're not going directly out into that deep water. Especially not in the place where you almost drowned. You want to stay close to where you started. You want to stay back near the shore, back where you first learned to love the water. So, this coming week, I'm returning to D&D 4E, playing personally. A group of mine that I was a part of for the longest time, that I had to step away from during recent unpleasantness, has reached level 30. And they are about to finish the Scales of War campaign. And I'm going to be joining them again. And not only am I going to be joining them, I'm going to be rejoining them with the character that started the Scales of War, the character that I had played for the longest time in the Scales of War, one of my most favorite D&D characters that I've ever played. This character started out as a budding wizard in her backstory, before she fell in with a cult of arcanists. She saw that cult murder her parents in front of her. And at that point, she left angrily and swore vengeance upon them. Swore to the very stars in the night sky that she would destroy them. And she was given power by those stars. As she grew in power, she learned the truth about her destiny. That not just this cult, but there were other cults that proclaimed the name of one of the many gods of the Points of Light realm, and did terrible things in that god's name, and that many of them the gods actually encouraged. Once, when she was close to dying, she saw a vision. That vision was of the goddess Selune and of Moradin, the dwarven god. They were talking to her, and they told her about a destiny that she had. A truly epic destiny that she would eventually ascend to. But before then, she had much that she had to accomplish. So they sent her back to the realm of the living, and she grew in power some more, feeling unease at being watched by the gods because her experiences with cults had left her very much angry at much of the pantheon, and probably justifiably so. And yet, she felt herself getting more and more powerful from the stars. Only she knew that it wasn't from some eldritch creatures out in realms beyond seeing. She knew that that power was coming from the goddess of night herself. And eventually, as she became more powerful, she discovered, much to her eternal chagrin, that she was destined to become a demigoddess in her own right. So, despite much annoyance, she fought desperately. And eventually, her spark spontaneously ignited, somewhat prematurely, and she ascended to the astral plane to rejoin the goddess, where she was given the role Punisher of the gods. A god that would keep the other gods in line. She became the patron saint of astronomers, of star-packed warlocks, and pure unadulterated badasses. She had people worshipping her. She had a cleric who joined her old comrades in her name to help punish the guilty in the name of the Lady Darkstar. And now, at last, as her party prepares to come face to face with the Dragon Queen herself, the goddess of greed and avarice, Tiamat, she finds she doesn't want to sit this one out. So back into the Scales of War campaign descends my star-packed warlock, my mistress of the starry night, my demigoddess, Albireo Darkstar. I return to the game I love with a character that I love to play. Keep it casual, y'all.